I know why you're here. Yes, I think Nightreign is getting a second DLC. And there's actually a lot of reasons why. May 30th, 2026 marks the 1-year anniversary of Nightreign. And historically, that's when FromSoft starts making announcements. But more importantly, there are a few things about this game that make a second DLC feel way more likely than people think. Because if you look at how FromSoft handles their games, and what's already in Nightreign, it would actually be kinda weird if there wasn't anything. Let's start with reason number 1. FromSoft has a pretty clear history of letting their teams see projects through. Dark Souls 2 is probably the best example. The game got support for years after its release until it eventually became something that's actually pretty good. Whether you like the game or not, it shows that they're not afraid to let a team stick with something long-term instead of just moving on immediately. Just like Nightreign, Dark Souls 2 was made by a B team, while Miyazaki was focused on Bloodborne. After the initial release, they had no commitment other than the 3 DLC, but they still made an entire new game basically with the remake. And that matters here, because Nightreign doesn't feel like a project that's finished. The biggest reason I have for feeling this way is Everdark Heelster, or however you say his name. There's an icon for him in the game files, and that's been known for a while now. But what makes this interesting isn't that he exists in the files, it's that I don't see a world where FromSoft wouldn't have already designed this boss, or at the very least scoped him out. He is the most obvious capstone for the game. He fits perfectly as a final encounter, the kind of thing you'd expect to be the last major addition. So the idea that they would just never include him and leave that thread hanging doesn't really line up with how they usually handle things. Now that alone doesn't guarantee a second DLC, and I'm sure that you might be thinking, why would I think that we'd get another DLC instead of getting an Everdark Heelster announcement? Well, that's because when you look at this with the timeline, it starts to make a lot more sense. It has been 6 months since the last time we've had a content drop. If you think, like I do, that Everdark Heelster is more than likely going to happen, it doesn't make sense that it would take this long for them to release the fight. Don't get me wrong, he will likely be a very cool encounter, but probably not something that a majority of the player base would come back 6 months later just to fight. Even more than that, it wouldn't take them this long to have made a single boss. He probably would have come out months ago. But you know what else took 6 months before it came out? The Forsaken Hollows DLC, their first DLC, came out 6 months, about maybe 5, after the game's initial release. And there's even a precedent for them announcing a second DLC after a year. Elden Ring's DLC wasn't announced immediately either. There was a long stretch where people assumed it just wasn't happening. I even found an article from PC Gamer saying that it was unlikely they'd be announcing a DLC for Elden Ring for the anniversary. And then 3 days after the anniversary, Shadow of the Erdtree was officially announced. Nightreign is lining up in a very similar way. So if they are still working on the game at all, it's probably not just the one boss. It has to be something bigger, or this just doesn't make sense. Not as a marketing move, not as a content release schedule. They have to be cooking up something that will bring back players and feel like a real expansion to the game. So if there was another expansion, what would it include? I think before even new bosses, we would likely be getting additional weapons, specifically ones from the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, because not only are those very cool movesets, but they've been getting demanded basically since Nightreign dropped. Other than that, 2 new characters, another map, and if you want my best guess on what bosses they'll include, I'm going to say probably Godfrey, one of the Dark Souls 2 DLC bosses, maybe the cat even, and of course the Bed of Chaos. The important part really is that everything points to them not quite being done with the game yet. The only thing that gives me any hesitation is the fact that we haven't seen a leak about this. But if we've genuinely reached a point where something only exists if it leaks first, then I don't really know what to say. So yeah, I'm calling it now. I think Nightreign DLC 2 gets announced, if not on the anniversary, a couple of days before or after. And if they really aren't making a second DLC, then I guess it would be Everdark Heelster. I would just be surprised if they really don't do anything. With that, thank you all very much for watching. If you found this interesting, please leave a like on the video, and maybe consider subscribing if you enjoy how I talk about things. Do you think that they're actually done with Nightreign, or not? Let me know in the comments, and until next time, see ya.